It was a quiet Sunday morning in the town of Tal, Batangas. The church bells echoed softly across the narrow streets as sunlight spilled over the newly restored Basilica of Saint Martin de Tours, a structure that had stood since 1575. The townspeople gathered in awe, marveling at the shimmering gold leaf that covered the altar and the polished wooden pews that gleamed like mirrors. No one could explain how such a costly restoration had been possible. The local government hadn't funded it. No wealthy family had claimed involvement. Yet everything had been done perfectly, down to the smallest carving on the pulpit. When Father Mateo unlocked the office safe that morning, he found a small envelope with a single note and a bank transfer slip. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. "For the kindness of your people," the note said, "you may never know my name." That was all. No sender, no address, no explanation. By afternoon, the town was alive with whispers. Some said it was an angel's work. Others believed a long-forgotten family had returned to repay a debt. A few called it a miracle, the kind that reminded people to believe again. But Father Mateo, who had served in Tal for more than 2 decades, sensed something different. Not divine intervention, but gratitude left behind by human hands. At the edge of the plaza, Lido, the retired bellkeeper, sat by the church gate polishing his old keys. When asked about the mysterious donor, he chuckled softly. "Maybe it's that man in white," he said. "He used to come here every few months. Never spoke a word, just knelt, left flowers or a candle with a note that said, 'Thank you.'" Father Mateo looked up at the grand church, the sunlight reflecting off its golden dome. Somewhere someone had remembered this place, remembered its people, with love powerful enough to rebuild what time had worn down. And though no one could name the giver, everyone could feel his presence. The air in Tal that morning carried something unexplainable, something like grace returning home. A few days after the town's excitement had settled, Carlo, a young seminarian assisting Father Mateo, stayed behind in the rectory to organize church records. As he sorted through stacks of receipts and letters, one piece of paper caught his eye. A bank transfer slip written partly in Chinese characters. Unlike the others, this one carried a peculiar note. "This is not charity. This is gratitude." The phrase echoed in his mind. It didn't sound like the language of donation. It felt personal. Intrigued, Carlo brought it to Father Mateo. "Father, look at this," he said. "It's the same account that paid for the restoration, but the message, it's repeated." Father Mateo studied the paper in silence, his brow furrowing. The handwriting, the phrasing, there was intent behind every word. "Whoever sent this," he murmured, "didn't want recognition. He wanted meaning." Carlo couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, while the town slept, he searched the name listed on the bank form. Zhang Wei. The results startled him. Zhang Wei was a well-known textile magnate in China, a man often featured in business magazines, but with no ties to the church or to the Philippines. Why would a Chinese businessman spend a fortune restoring a centuries-old Catholic church in a small Philippine town he had no connection to? The next morning, Carlo showed his findings to Father Mateo. The priest listened quietly, then placed the document back into the drawer. "If the man wanted to stay hidden, maybe that's where his peace lies," he said. "But don't you want to know why?" Carlo asked. Father Mateo smiled faintly. "Curiosity is good, Carlo. But sometimes faith means leaving questions unanswered." Still, Carlo couldn't let it go. The phrase kept circling in his thoughts. "This is not charity. This is gratitude." He began to sense that behind those words was a story not about money, but about memory. A debt of kindness waiting to be understood. And though Father Mateo urged restraint, Carlo quietly decided he would find the truth. Not to expose the man, but to understand the gratitude that could move a stranger across oceans. Years before the Golden Dome of Tal was restored, a younger Zhang Wei stood on the busy streets of Manila, lost and desperate. His suitcase had been stolen, his passport gone, and the little cash he carried vanished overnight. He had come to the Philippines on a trading trip that turned into disaster. Stranded in a foreign city with no one to turn to, He slept near a bus terminal for 2 nights, clutching a crumpled piece of paper with his embassy's number. Too embarrassed to call, too proud to beg. On the third morning, a woman approached him. She carried a woven basket of bread and wore a simple smile that felt disarmingly kind. "You look tired," she said softly. "Come eat something." Her name was Maria. She didn't ask where he was from or what had happened. She simply brought him food, found a local family willing to offer a small room for him to stay, and helped him reach the Chinese embassy. When he tried to repay her, she shook her head. "No need," she said. "One day help someone else instead." Before he left, Maria handed him a small wooden cross. It was roughly carved but polished from years of handling. On its back, a single word was etched in Filipino: Gracia. Grace. "You don't have to be Catholic to believe in grace," she told him. "Sometimes it just means knowing that you've been helped for a reason." Zhang Wei didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded, holding the cross like a lifeline. Back in China, he returned to work, rebuilt his business, and eventually built an empire. Yet the memory of Maria lingered. Her quiet strength, her warmth, the way she gave without expecting anything in return. Whenever life pressed heavily upon him, he would take out the little wooden cross and trace the word Gracia with his thumb. It reminded him of a truth he had nearly forgotten, that kindness, freely given, could change the course of a life. And for Zhang Wei, that act of grace in Manila became the compass for everything that followed. Years passed, and Zhang Wei's name became synonymous with success. He built factories, expanded into global markets, and was celebrated as one of China's leading figures in the textile industry. Yet amid the noise of boardrooms and flashing cameras, he remained a man haunted by a quiet memory. A woman who had offered bread and shelter without asking for anything in return. On the shelves of his private office, hidden behind polished awards and business certificates, stood a small wooden cross. Its surface had faded with time, but the word Gracia still caught the light. Whenever he looked at it, Zhang Wei would feel something stir, a sense of unfinished gratitude. One evening, as he reviewed a report about his company's overseas branches, he paused. A news article appeared on his screen. A story about the crumbling church of Tal, one of the oldest in the Philippines. The photos showed cracks in the walls, weathered statues, and a community trying to raise funds for restoration. Without hesitation, Zhang Wei made a call to his financial advisor. "I want to help them," he said simply. From that moment, his life took a different rhythm. Using trusted intermediaries, he began sending quiet donations, not just to the church in Tal, but to small schools in Samar, rural clinics in Zamboanga, orphanages in Cavite. Each envelope, each transfer, carried the same handwritten line: "This is not charity. This is gratitude." He never used his real name. The gifts came from anonymous accounts routed through layers of privacy. It wasn't about reputation or influence. It was about remembrance, an invisible bridge between the man he once was and the people who had saved him. Even when government restrictions tightened and foreign transactions drew suspicion, he continued. Each act felt like a prayer. He would sit by his window, overlooking Shanghai's skyline, whispering into the night, "For Maria, for Grace." He began to believe that the true legacy of a person wasn't the wealth they left behind, but the goodness they set in motion. Goodness that needed no witness, no applause. And so across the sea, quiet miracles began to bloom under the name of no one, only gratitude itself. Months after the mysterious restoration of the church in Tal, Father Mateo and Carlo gathered the townspeople one evening. The sun was setting behind the bell tower, casting amber light through the stained glass windows. "We may never know who rebuilt this place," Father Mateo said, "but we can continue what he began." That night, the idea for Project Liwanag, the Light Project, was born. It wasn't about money or grand gestures. It was about presence. People volunteered to teach children after school, repair old homes, visit the sick, clean the town square. Everywhere they went, they left a small note that read, "This is not charity, this is gratitude." Word spread across nearby provinces. Soon other parishes joined in. Communities on distant islands began organizing their own versions of Project Luwanang. A quiet movement of kindness unfolded. No donors, no publicity, just people helping people, because someone, somewhere, once helped them. Far away in Jakarta, Zhang Wei sat in a modest hotel room overlooking the harbor. Age had softened his face, and the years of travel had left him weary but calm. A courier had delivered a letter that morning, written in careful English. It came from Tal. Inside was a photograph of the church, its golden dome gleaming against the afternoon sky. Beneath the photo were a few words. "You once sat here in silence." "We remember, and we continue," Zhang Wei smiled faintly. He placed the letter beside the wooden cross, now worn smooth from his touch. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant candles on the water. He whispered, "Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Philippines." For the first time, he felt no need to hide his name or his story. It wasn't about him anymore. It never had been. The grace he once received had found its way home, multiplied through countless hands and hearts. Back in Tal, the bells rang again. Children laughed in the courtyard, elders shared food under the trees, and the church doors stood wide open, glowing with evening light. And in that golden silence, one truth lingered: that unseen kindness can outlive a lifetime, lighting paths long after the giver is gone.